The Galactic Union's Grand Hall was silent when Syrah entered, her thin silver robes brushing across the cold floor that shimmered with light from the stars beyond. The Velka were known throughout the galaxy as the most gifted telepaths ever born. They could reach into any mind, feel any truth, and see through every deception. For centuries, no species had ever resisted them, until humanity appeared. The humans had arrived on the galactic edge only a few decades ago, claiming nothing, asking nothing, but building quietly and refusing every invitation to join the council. The Union feared what it didn't understand, and so they summoned Syrah, the youngest but most skilled of her kind, to do what no one else dared, read the human mind. As she walked toward the chamber, she could hear whispers from the other delegates, voices laced with unease. "They say the human eyes hold storms," one murmured. "They say their emotions burn like suns," said another. Syrah ignored them. She was not afraid. She had seen death, pain, and madness in the minds of warlords and tyrants across galaxies. The mind was a map, and she had learned to walk it without getting lost. When the metal doors opened, she found herself standing before the council and the lone human, Commander Reed. He was tall, calm, his dark uniform spotless, his eyes unreadable. Around him, the alien delegates shifted nervously, as if even his silence pressed against their skin. "Commander Reed of Earth," the council leader began, his voice deep and commanding. "You have refused the telepathic exchange for 3 cycles. Today, you will comply. The Union demands transparency." Reed's jaw tightened slightly, but his tone remained polite. "Humanity values its privacy. We do not consent to mental intrusion." "It is not intrusion," Syrah said gently, stepping forward. "It is understanding." Reed looked at her with an expression that wasn't anger, but pity. "You don't want to do this," he said quietly. "I've seen entire worlds burn," she replied, her tendrils shimmering faintly as her telepathic aura grew. "Whatever lies inside your mind cannot break me." "You think so," Reed murmured, "but we tried to warn you." The council leader nodded impatiently. "Proceed, Telepath Syrah." She took a slow breath, extending her tendrils toward his temples, the air around them humming with psychic energy. The chamber lights dimmed as her consciousness slipped through the barrier of flesh and into thought. At first, it was familiar, like stepping into a pool of memories. She saw flashes of oceans, laughter, cities lit by dawn. But then everything changed. The surface of Reed's mind dropped away into something deeper, darker, endless. She saw screams, war, fire raining from skies, machines tearing through mud, hands reaching out of trenches, eyes staring from smoke. She tried to pull back, but something gripped her, a presence vast and cold, watching her from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here," 1,000 voices whispered in unison. Syrah gasped, her tendrils trembling. She felt the weight of 1,000,000 souls pressing against her mind, memories so ancient they bled through time itself. Creatures devouring their own to survive, humans fighting monsters not from space, but from their own history. She saw extinction after extinction, and yet, they lived. Every time the world ended, they rebuilt. Every loss, every agony, every horror. They remembered it all. And deep beneath it, something darker moved, something ancient that wasn't just memory but will. It stared at her through the human's eyes, a force that had learned to thrive in pain. "Who are you?" she whispered in her mind, but the voice replied, "We are everyone who refused to die." She screamed as the vision split open, showing her endless chains of evolution, blood mixing with iron, fire shaping flesh, despair turning into defiance. Humanity's mind was not a single voice. It was billions, layered over millennia, all speaking as one. "You cannot read what never forgot," they said. "We are the result of every nightmare that tried to end us." The psychic force crushed into her mind like a tidal wave, overwhelming her senses. She felt her consciousness shatter, collapsing under the weight of it all. Pain exploded behind her eyes as her knees hit the floor. The chamber lights flickered violently. Aliens shouted, their voices distant and muffled. Reed hadn't moved. He just stood there, calm, watching her convulse. Guards rushed forward, but none dared to touch her. She was screaming, not with her mouth, but with her mind, the echo tearing through the telepathic frequencies like thunder. Then, suddenly, silence. Syrah's body went limp, her tendrils coiling weakly as she collapsed to the ground. The smell of ozone filled the air. The psychic shields around the chamber glowed faintly, protecting the others from whatever she had touched. 2 medics rushed in, lifting her onto a stretcher. Her breathing was shallow, her pupils dilated. "She's still conscious," one whispered. "But her mind, it's burned." As they carried her away, her hand reached out, trembling, pointing toward the human. "How can you live with that inside your mind?" she whispered hoarsely, eyes wide with terror. "How do you not go mad?" Reed met her gaze without a word. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even the council leader, usually proud and commanding, looked pale. Finally, Reed broke the silence. His voice was soft but carried through the hall like steel. "We tried to warn you not to look." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the council frozen. The other aliens stared at one another, whispers rippling through the room. "What did she see?" one asked fearfully. "What could frighten a Velka telepath?" No one answered. Outside the chamber, medics worked desperately to stabilize Syrah. Her heart rate spiked again, and she began to mumble words in a low, broken tone. "Darkness, fire, eyes that never close. They're still alive in there." Her tendrils twitched violently before she went still again. One of the doctors looked up, pale. Her mind's in shock. It's like she saw something alive in him. They injected a stabilizer, but her psychic field kept flickering. It pulsed like something was echoing from inside her, an afterimage of humanity's collective memory refusing to fade. Meanwhile, in a quiet corridor, Commander Reed walked alone, his expression calm but his eyes haunted. He stopped by a window, looking out at the stars. His reflection looked back at him, tired, older than his years. "They'll never understand," he murmured. "They've never faced the dark like we did." Behind him, the council's security chief approached nervously. "Commander Reed," he said. "The telepath, she nearly died. The council wants an explanation." Reed didn't turn around. "Tell them this," he said quietly. "Our minds aren't meant to be read. They're meant to be survived." The officer frowned. "What does that mean?" Reed looked out into the void, where the stars shimmered like cold eyes. "It means she only saw a glimpse," he said. "If she had gone deeper, she would have seen why we left Earth, and why we'll never let anyone in again." His voice carried an edge of sorrow and warning. Far behind him, the medics struggled to keep Syrah stable, unaware that what she'd touched wasn't just memory. It was the shadow of something buried in every human mind. The part that remembered fear so deeply it learned to turn it into strength. The part that had faced extinction and called it a challenge. As the council prepared for an emergency session, word spread across the Galactic Union that something had gone wrong. 2 telepaths were dead before this mission. Now, the youngest prodigy had fallen, and all because she touched a human's mind. For the first time in centuries, the Union's most powerful telepathic race felt something new, fear. And in the center of that fear stood humanity, silent and calm, holding secrets that could shatter galaxies. The Galactic Council chamber, once a place of order and calm, now pulsed with tension like a living thing. The news of Syrah's collapse had spread faster than light itself, echoing across systems and stirring panic in species that had never known fear before. Velka healers surrounded the medical wing, their shimmering tendrils glowing dimly as they tried to repair what was left of her mind. But even their most powerful psychic tools could not erase the damage. Her mind burned with images no alien could describe. Every time they tried to read her, they recoiled, screaming as if touching fire. It wasn't infection. It was memory, too vast and heavy to contain. Outside the chamber doors, the council gathered in urgent session, the air thick with arguments. "This was supposed to be a simple contact," hissed the Chal delegate, her transparent skin flickering with anxiety. "She was the best of them. What did the human do to her?" "Nothing physical," replied another, an insectoid scholar with trembling antennae. "But something inside his mind attacked her. It's psychic contagion. It must be. The council leader struck the table, his claws sparking against the metal. Enough. The Velka telepath has not died. We will not call it an attack until proven. His words carried authority, but even he looked uneasy. Across from him sat Commander Reed, the lone human in the room, silent as a shadow. His posture was calm, his hands folded neatly, his eyes fixed on the table, but something about that stillness unnerved them all. The air seemed colder near him, as though the room itself feared to touch him. "Commander," the leader said at last, voice cautious, "what happened during the exchange?" Reed looked up slowly. "She went too far." "Too far?" barked the insectoid. "You mean she entered your mind as ordered?" Reed's eyes flickered like stormlight. "No one enters a human mind without understanding what waits inside. We warned you. We told you to stop probing." The room erupted in overlapping voices. "This is unacceptable. Are you threatening the council? He's hiding something." The shouting grew until the council leader slammed his clawed hand again, shaking the floor. "Silence." The hall fell still, the echoes fading like whispers of ghosts. "Commander Reed," he said, lowering his voice, "explain what your kind is hiding. What frightened our telepath?" Reed leaned back slightly, his face unreadable. "Do you know what it means to remember pain?" he asked quietly. The question caught them off guard. "Every species remembers pain," snapped the Chal delegate. "Our ancestors suffered wars too." Reed shook his head slowly. "No. You remember moments. Humans remember ages. Every scream, every death, every extinction attempt. We don't forget. We never could." His voice was calm, but the weight behind it made even the bravest alien lower their gaze. "She saw what we carry. Not just one life, but millions stacked in memory, layer upon layer. We evolved in a world that tried to kill us every day. Our minds learned to endure what no telepath should ever touch." "Endure?" whispered one alien. "You mean you kept it alive?" Reed's eyes met hers. "Exactly." The chamber went silent again. Somewhere far away, a monitor beeped weakly, Syrah's vitals still unstable. The Velka healer stepped inside, bowing low before the council. "She wakes," he said, voice trembling. "But she is not whole." They followed him into the medical bay, where Syrah lay on a silver bed, her tendrils dull and lifeless. Her skin, once luminous blue, had faded to pale gray. When her eyes opened, they were wide, glassy, unblinking. She looked at Reed first and flinched, pulling away as if burned. "Don't let them near me," she whispered hoarsely. "Their minds, the noise, it never stops." The healer tried to calm her, but she shook violently. "I saw it," she cried. "I saw the fire that doesn't end. The shadows that learned to scream back. They are still in there." "What did you see?" the council leader demanded. "Tell us what the human hides." Syrah's breathing quickened. "They don't hide it. They live with it. Every second. It's like walking through a storm made of memories that want to kill you, but they control it. They hold it together." "How?" She turned to Reed, tears forming. "How can you live with that inside you?" Reed said nothing. His expression softened only a little. "Because we had no choice." Syrah's trembling grew worse until the healers sedated her again, lowering her gently back onto the bed. The council members exchanged uneasy looks. One whispered, "Maybe she's infected." Another said, "Or maybe humanity carries a weapon of the mind." The council leader glared at Reed. "You will submit to a second probe. The Union cannot tolerate this danger." Reed's voice was calm but cold. "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake was trusting your word," snarled the insectoid scholar. "Your species hides something. If you won't tell us, we'll find another way." Reed stood slowly, the chair scraping the floor. His shadow stretched long under the sterile lights. "You won't find what you're looking for," he said. "You'll only find what's waiting for you." The guards stepped forward as if to stop him, but the council leader waved them off. "Let him go," he said quietly. For now. As Reed left, the council chamber filled with frantic discussion. The Velka representative spoke first. We must forbid all contact with human minds until further study. This could destabilize our telepaths. Or worse, added another. If their thoughts are contagious, they could break entire fleets. Then what do you suggest? Demanded the leader. The Velka's tendrils flickered nervously. Send a stronger one. Send Korthel. His ancient. If anyone can withstand the human mind, it's him. The chamber buzzed with reluctant agreement. Orders were transmitted within the hour. Across the galaxy, a message reached a distant monastery of the Velka order, where the old telepath Korthal meditated in silence. When he received the summons, he opened his eyes slowly, his gaze distant, haunted. A human mind, he murmured. They should never have asked me. Yet he accepted. Meanwhile, on the human diplomatic ship orbiting above, Commander Reed stood before the viewing glass, staring at the blue shimmer of the planet below. Another human officer approached quietly. They're going to try again, aren't they? Reed nodded. They always do. Should we stop them? The officer asked. No, Reed said softly. Let them look. Maybe then they'll finally understand why we fear our own memories more than any alien ever could. Down in the medical bay, Syrah stirred in her sedation, whispering one final phrase before sleep took her again. They remember the dark. Those words echoed through the Union like a curse. And as Korthal prepared to make contact with humanity, no one, not even the bravest among them, could shake the growing sense that something far older and far more dangerous was stirring behind those human eyes, waiting for the next mind foolish enough to touch it. The chamber chosen for the second probe was unlike any other ever used by the Galactic Union. It was deep beneath the Council citadel, surrounded by energy dampeners and psychic shielding strong enough to contain the thoughts of a god. Only a handful of beings were allowed to enter, and even fewer dared to stay once the preparations began. The air inside shimmered with raw psychic power as the ancient Velka telepath Korthal took his place at the center. He was enormous, his tendrils long and scarred from centuries of probing minds across the stars. He had walked through the dreams of dying planets, touched the thoughts of machines, and read the final screams of extinct species. Yet as he looked upon the empty chair prepared for the human subject, even he felt something tighten in his chest, a quiet warning his instincts could not ignore. Commander Reed entered calmly, his black uniform blending with the dark walls. He carried no fear, no aggression, only silence. The telepath studied him carefully. You understand what I will do? Korthal asked. Reed nodded once. I understand. But I warn you as I warned the last one. What you find, you cannot unsee. The elder Velka's tone was grave. I have seen the minds of monsters, human. I have seen worlds die screaming. There is nothing I cannot withstand. Reed's gaze was steady. We'll see. The council officials activated the amplifiers. Lights dimmed. The psychic field thrummed like thunder. Korthal extended his tendrils, slow and precise, placing them at the sides of Reed's head. The room grew cold as he entered the human mind. At first, there was nothing, an ocean of stillness, so quiet it made him doubt he had connected at all. Then, slowly, he began to sink. The surface broke apart, and his consciousness fell through memories. He saw flashes of water, laughter, the smell of earth and rain. For a heartbeat, he felt peace. But then, like cracks forming in glass, the visions twisted. He saw storms tearing through cities, skies on fire, oceans boiling with ships of war. He heard the cries of millions, men, women, and children, screaming against the darkness. He saw hands clutching weapons made from the bones of fallen gods, saw faces staring into the void with defiance instead of fear. What is this? He whispered, trembling. But there was no answer, only the sound of breathing, not Reed's, but something older, deeper, echoing from below the memory. Korthal tried to retreat, but something pulled him deeper, dragging his mind through time itself. He saw humanity's rise, not glorious, but bloody. Tribes clawing through ice ages, empires burning, chains breaking, worlds lost and remade. Every memory pressed against him like a physical force, each one shouting the same word: survive. He fell through wars that lasted centuries, through deaths that should have broken any soul, through screams that turned into songs of resistance. The deeper he went, the less he saw individuals and the more he saw something else. Something vast, united, and terrifyingly alive. It wasn't a species. It was a single will stretching across eons, bound by pain, driven by fire. Stop! Korthal tried to pull away, but the darkness gripped tighter. You wanted to see. A voice whispered all around him. Now you'll remember. And suddenly, he was no longer watching history, he was inside it. He stood on a burning battlefield, surrounded by human soldiers fighting creatures made of shadow. Their armor was cracked, their weapons dying, but their eyes burned with light. One soldier turned toward him, face scarred, eyes hollow. You think you can understand, the soldier said, voice cold. You've never been hunted by your own gods. Korthal fell backward as the soldier's face melted into fire. The landscape changed again. He was falling through space now, through the ruins of planets that had turned to ash. He saw cities rebuilt atop bones, children laughing beside craters, humanity crawling forward no matter how many times the universe tried to erase them. And then he saw it, a vast shape sleeping at the center of their memory, coiled like a serpent made of every nightmare ever lived. Its eyes opened, two suns burning with defiance. The voice that spoke was not human, not alien, but something in between. We remember the dark, it said, the sound shaking the psychic field itself. We were born in it. Korthal screamed as the presence looked directly at him. His mind cracked under the weight of it. Every thought he had ever known shattered like glass. In the real world, alarms blared. The chamber walls pulsed red. The psychic monitors exploded one by one as his power overloaded the system. Cut the connection, shouted the technicians. He's breaking the containment. The amplifiers shattered in a storm of sparks as Korthal convulsed, his tendrils flailing wildly. Reed sat perfectly still, eyes closed, expression unreadable, as the elder's psychic scream tore through the station. When it was finally over, silence filled the room again. Smoke drifted from the machines. The telepath lay on the floor, his body trembling, his breathing shallow. The council medics rushed forward, but he pushed them away weakly, eyes wide in horror. They faced extinction, he rasped. And they did not die. They learned to love it. His tendrils quivered violently as he whispered, they are not a species. They are a storm pretending to be flesh. Then he collapsed completely, unconscious but alive. The council members were frozen, their faces pale with disbelief. Is he dead? One whispered. No, said a medic quietly, but he will never be the same. All eyes turned to Commander Reed, who stood slowly, his expression calm. Now you understand, he said. You tried to see what forged us. The more you look, the deeper it gets. The council leader's voice trembled. What was that? Reed turned toward him, his gaze hard as iron. That was memory. Every death, every war, every pain we ever lived through. You think we forget? No. We remember everything. It's why we survive. As he walked out, the remaining lights flickered, casting his shadow long across the chamber floor. Behind him, the ancient telepath whispered one last word before slipping into a coma. Deathwelders, the medics froze at the term, a word used only in legends to describe species born on planets too violent for life, worlds that forged predators instead of people. The realization spread like wildfire through the council ranks. Humanity wasn't just strong. They were born from nightmare. And for the first time, the galaxy began to wonder if the real danger was not what the humans hid, but what would happen if they ever stopped hiding at all. The news of the second telepath's collapse spread through the Galactic Union like wildfire, crossing light years faster than any official message could contain it. Fear rippled across worlds that once believed themselves superior, and for the first time in millennia, the council chambers echoed with the sound of uncertainty. No one wanted to admit it aloud, but everyone knew what it meant. Two of the most powerful telepaths in the galaxy had touched a human mind and both had fallen. The Velka Order had sealed itself in silence, refusing to speak to anyone. Their monasteries glowed red with psychic lockdowns, their symbols draped in mourning. The Union had always prided itself on logic, unity, and control. But now whispers filled the halls. What did they see? What are the humans hiding? Can something inside them harm us all? The council convened under emergency protocol. Hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy filled the great crystalline hall, the air thick with dread. The council leader, his pale skin glowing faintly beneath the overhead light, struck the podium with a trembling hand. "Two of our telepaths are broken," he began, voice echoing through the chamber. "The Velka healers say their minds touched something that should not exist. We demand answers." Commander Reed stood alone in the center, surrounded by security drones that kept their distance as if proximity itself was dangerous. His face was calm, but his eyes were distant, unreadable. "You asked for answers," he said slowly, "but the truth will not bring you peace." A wave of unease swept through the delegates. "Speak plainly, human," shouted one from the upper balcony. "What did your kind do to our telepaths?" Reed's gaze lifted, and for the briefest second, something cold flickered behind his eyes. "We did nothing to them. They came into our minds uninvited. They saw what they weren't ready to face." "Face what?" hissed another delegate. Reed took a deep breath. Humanity carries its history differently. Every death, every war, every wound, it stays with us. Our minds don't forget. We carry the memories of our ancestors as echoes, passed down in thought, in instinct, in blood. We remember every horror that tried to erase us, and every time we refused to die. Murmurs filled the room, but he kept speaking, his tone quiet, almost sorrowful. "Your telepaths reached into that place. They thought they would find a mind like yours, a garden of calm thoughts, peaceful streams of memory. But our minds are not gardens. They're graveyards filled with the voices of billions who never gave up. Every scar carved into our history became a part of us. They saw what happens when pain doesn't break a species, it shapes it." The council leader frowned deeply. "You're saying you evolved through trauma?" Reed nodded slowly. "We didn't just evolve through it. We thrived because of it. Fear taught us to build. Hunger taught us to create. War taught us to endure. The dark made us strong." "That's monstrous," whispered a delegate. "You sound like predators." "Maybe we are," Reed said quietly. "But even predators have rules. We learned them the hard way." The chamber fell silent again. Every alien there felt the same chill run down their spine. A reptilian scholar leaned forward nervously. "Then what did they see, Commander? What broke them?" Reed's voice softened, but the words felt like thunder. "They saw the human memory. The first fire. The first war. The first scream. They saw creatures that hunted us, gods that cursed us, stars that burned our homes, and through it all, they saw that we endured. They saw the truth of what it means to be human." "And what truth is that?" the council leader asked, his voice shaking despite himself. Reed met his gaze. "That pain is not our enemy. It's our teacher." A stunned silence filled the hall. Then someone shouted from the back, "You're dangerous." Another voice cried, "You should never have been allowed to walk among us." The chaos rose quickly, delegates yelling over one another, fear twisting into accusation. If their minds carry such power, what if it spreads? They could destroy entire species. We must restrict them. Reed stood silently amid the storm, letting their panic wash over him. When the shouting finally died, he spoke again. "You fear us because we reflect what you've forgotten. You've lived in peace so long you forgot what it takes to survive chaos. We never had that luxury." His tone carried no pride, no arrogance, only weary truth. Then, slowly, he looked toward the council leader. "You called this a union of civilizations," he said softly. "But perhaps you built it on the belief that fear was gone forever. You're wrong. Fear never disappears. It just hides. We learned to face it, and when it came for us again, We didn't fall. We adapted. He turned away, walking toward the exit, but before he could leave, the leader shouted after him, "What are you hiding, human? What else lives inside your mind?" Reed stopped, glancing back over his shoulder. "We're not hiding anything," he said. "We're just remembering what the universe tried to make us forget." He left the chamber without another word, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then the council erupted into chaos again, voices rising in fear and disbelief. "We can't let them spread. They're a danger to all psychic races. We should isolate their homeworld." But not everyone agreed. A few among them, those old enough to remember darker ages, stared at the empty doorway where Reed had stood and whispered, "They might be the only ones who can save us if the dark ever comes back." Far from the council, Syrah woke in her recovery chamber, her body weak but her mind clearer than before. She looked out at the stars, whispering to herself, "They remember the dark, and they carry the light inside it." Somewhere across the galaxy, in the deep void between stars, something ancient stirred at those words, as if awakened by memory itself. Humanity's secret was no longer theirs alone, and the galaxy would soon learn that some truths were better left untouched. Because inside every human mind was a spark that could terrify even gods, and now, the stars knew it existed. The medical wing was silent, filled only with the hum of machines and the slow, uneven breathing of the Velka telepath, Syrah. Weeks had passed since the incident, and though her body had healed, her mind remained haunted. The doctors said she was lucky to be alive, but Syrah didn't feel alive. She felt broken, like her soul had been dragged through a storm that never ended. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of the human mind. Fire raining from the sky, oceans turning red, cities falling and rising again, endless screams that turned into whispers of defiance. And somewhere in the middle of that chaos, something had looked back at her. It wasn't evil, it wasn't good, it simply was. Ancient. Watching. Waiting. That thought kept her awake at night. One evening, she felt a presence at her door and turned weakly to see Commander Reed standing there. He looked tired but calm, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "The council forbade contact." Reed stepped inside anyway, his boots echoing softly against the polished floor. "I thought you'd want to talk," he said. She closed her eyes, trembling. "Talk? About what?" "About the thing inside your mind that almost killed me." He said nothing, just pulled a chair beside her bed and Saturday. "You're afraid of what you don't understand," he said finally. "You think you saw something unnatural, but you didn't. You saw us, what we are, what we've always been." Syrah's voice cracked. "No, I saw more than that. I saw something behind you. Something inside you. It wasn't human, not completely." Reed's gaze hardened slightly. "It was human," he said. "Every nightmare you saw was our past, our evolution. We were shaped by extinction. We learned to live beside it until we became part of it. What you saw was the shadow of survival." Syrah shook her head violently, tears forming in her eyes. "No, you don't understand. I've touched the minds of killers, of entire species wiped out by their own madness. But this was different. It wasn't chaos. It was organized. Like every death, every scream, every act of violence became part of a greater will. How can you live with that?" Reed looked at her quietly. "We don't live with it. We carry it. It's the weight of being human." "You carry death," she whispered. "No," he replied. "We carry the memory of surviving it." Syrah stared at him, trying to find words, but the more she thought about what she saw, the more she realized there were none. Her kind had always believed knowledge brought peace. But the human mind had shown her that knowledge could also bring terror. "When I looked into you," she said softly, "I saw faces, billions of them. They weren't ghosts, but they weren't gone either. They were inside you, whispering, guiding. It felt like you were all one mind, billions of voices held together by pain." Reed nodded slightly. "You're not wrong. We call it memory. We don't forget the dead. Their lessons stay with us. That's how we survive." She trembled. That's why I couldn't stay inside your mind. It wasn't one consciousness. It was billions. No telepath could survive that. We feel minds like rivers, flowing, simple, connected. But yours is an ocean in storm, filled with wreckage and lightning. How can you stand it without losing yourself? Reed looked away, his tone heavy. Because we don't resist the storm, we learn to become part of it. The moment we fight it, we drown. So we embrace it. Every scar, every loss, every failure. They remind us who we are. Syrah stared at him, a mixture of awe and horror in her eyes. That's why no telepath can read you, she whispered. You're not one mind to touch. You're 1,000 lifetimes, 1,000,000,000 scars. Reed didn't answer. He simply stood and looked out the window, where the planet's twin moons cast pale light across the room. After a long silence, she spoke again, voice trembling. When I touched you, I saw a creature made of light and shadow behind your thoughts. I saw its eyes. It looked at me as if it knew me. What was it? Reed didn't turn around. His voice came out low and cold. That was humanity itself. The will that refuses to die. Every time we faced the end, that's what woke up inside us. Some call it spirit, others evolution. We just call it survival. Syrah's tendrils trembled. It feels alive. It is, Reed said quietly. Every human carries it, whether they know it or not. That's why your kind fears us. You sense it, even before you touch us. That's why you keep your distance. Her eyes widened. You mean, the darkness isn't evil? Reed turned finally, meeting her gaze. No. It's the part of us that kept fighting when everything else gave up. The universe tried to break us, and instead, it taught us how to stand. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Syrah began to cry, not from pain, but from realization. We thought ourselves enlightened, she said softly. But now I see. We escaped our darkness. You embraced yours and made it your strength. Reed didn't reply. He just stood there, watching her as she wept. Then she looked up at him again, her eyes glimmering under the moonlight. Promise me one thing, human, she whispered. If that thing inside you ever awakens fully, if the storm ever breaks free, will you stop it? Reed's face was unreadable. We can't stop it, he said quietly. We can only guide it. And with that, he turned to leave. But as he reached the door, her voice stopped him. Commander. He paused. When I looked into you, I thought I saw the end of the galaxy. He waited, silent. But now I think, she continued softly, I saw its only hope. Reed didn't answer, but a faint, almost sad smile crossed his face. Then maybe, he said, there's still something worth remembering. He left the room, the door sliding shut behind him with a quiet hiss. Syrah lay back, staring at the ceiling, her breathing slow and even. The fear inside her was still there, but now it felt different, less like terror and more like awe. She understood something no one else in the galaxy did. The humans were not dangerous because of what they could destroy. They were dangerous because of what they could endure. And as she drifted into uneasy sleep, her last thought was a whisper carried through the stars. The mind that remembers darkness is the one that brings the light. The night was silent aboard the Union station, but silence in space was never peace. It was only the breath before something broke. The council had called for an emergency meeting after Syrah's recovery, but the meeting never started. Strange readings began to appear across the psychic monitoring network, brief, powerful pulses radiating from the human section of the ship. The telepathic sensors flickered, shorting out one by one as if burned from the inside. Every alien on board felt it, a pressure, like the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on their minds. Commander Reed sat alone in his quarters, his hands clasped, eyes closed. He could feel it too, that familiar hum under his skin, the old whisper that came whenever humanity was threatened. It was not a voice, not exactly, more like the echo of something ancient and vast that lived beneath consciousness. We're being watched again, he muttered to himself. Across the ship, Syrah woke with a gasp, clutching her head. She could hear them, the echoes of human thought, millions of voices whispering in unison, not chaotic but unified, resonating like a deep chant. She stumbled from her bed, her tendrils trembling as she followed the pool that led straight to Reed's quarters. Outside, the guards tried to stop her, but the psychic energy was so strong it made their skin crawl. "He's losing control," one of them said, terrified. "It's not him," Syrah replied. "It's them." She pushed past them and stepped into the room. The air was thick, vibrating with invisible power. Reed sat still, eyes open but distant, like someone listening to a faraway storm. "They are calling," he said softly. "Who?" she asked, though she already knew. He looked at her, and for a moment she saw something ancient behind his calm, something that wasn't supposed to be awake. "Every memory, every death, every scream. They never sleep," he said. "They wake when we're in danger." Syrah's voice shook. "You mean, the storm inside your kind?" He nodded slowly. "It's not inside me. It's inside all of us. It's the part that remembers when survival meant madness, when mercy meant extinction. It's what your telepaths touched. Now it's awake again." Before she could answer, the lights flickered, and the entire ship trembled as if struck by a wave. Across the psychic channels, every telepath on board screamed. The human frequency had activated, a wave of collective consciousness echoing through subspace, spreading across systems faster than light. "It's not just you," Syrah shouted. "It's spreading to every human." "It's not spreading," Reed said, standing slowly. "It's connecting." His voice had changed, deeper, layered, as if more than one voice spoke through him. Outside the viewport, the stars seemed to dim, bending faintly under invisible pressure. Syrah stepped back, her heart pounding. "What are you doing?" Reed's gaze turned toward the stars. "The Council thinks they can cage memory. They can't. Every attempt to suppress it triggers the same instinct: survival. We don't start wars. We remember them. And memory doesn't die." In the Council tower far below, alarms blared. The psychic network overloaded, waves of energy bursting through containment fields. "It's human resonance," shouted a technician. "It's affecting every telepathic race within range." Council members clutched their heads, hearing the same low chant echoing through their minds. Thousands of human voices whispering one phrase again and again. "We endured. We remember." In Reed's chamber, the hum reached a peak. Syrah fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of consciousness pressing against her mind. She saw visions, not of death but of determination. Hands holding hands through fire, children laughing amid ruins, soldiers standing even when the sky burned. It wasn't horror she felt now. It was power built from pain. Reed reached out and steadied her. His touch was cold, yet comforting. "This is who we are," he said quietly. "Every time something tried to erase us, we turned pain into armor. That's why your telepaths broke. They weren't built to carry this much memory." "You have to stop," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You'll destroy them." "I can't stop it," he said. "It's not me doing this. It's them, all of them, remembering at once. The galaxy touched our pain, and now it echoes back." She looked into his eyes and saw it. Endless faces overlapping like ripples on water. Generations of humans standing behind him, silent but present. "You're not one person," she whispered. "You're humanity itself." Reed's expression softened. Maybe for a moment. Then the wave began to fade. The hum lowered, the lights steadied, and the psychic fields slowly dispersed. Across the ship, telepaths collapsed, exhausted but alive. The council chamber lay in ruins, systems fried from the surge, delegates pale and trembling. Reed exhaled, his body shaking from the strain. "It's done," he said quietly. "They've gone back to sleep." Syrah looked at him, horrified and awed at once. "Sleep? You mean that thing, the storm? It's alive, waiting." "Always," he said. "It never leaves. It's part of us. We keep it buried, until the universe reminds us why we needed it." She stood silently, staring at him as the truth sank in. Humanity wasn't dangerous because of weapons or armies. It was because every human carried a history that refused to die. The storm wasn't just rage or pain. It was remembrance turned into will. As the ship returned to silence, Reed turned to Syrah one last time. "Now you understand why we warned you," he said. "You can't read what was never meant to be understood." Syrah nodded slowly, whispering, "No one should carry that much pain." Reed looked toward the stars. "Maybe, but someone has to." And as the ship drifted through the void, the faint echo of that psychic chant lingered in the dark, soft, endless, human. "We remember. We endure." The Galactic Union had always seen itself as eternal, a shining order built on peace and intellect, but after the human resonance event, everything changed. Psychic beacons flickered out across sectors, telepaths went silent, and whole fleets reported dreams that weren't their own. Visions of war, fire, and 1,000 human eyes staring through the void. Worlds that had never known fear began to feel it again. The Council called for crisis meetings, but no one could think clearly. Every alien who had once mocked humanity now spoke of them in whispers, afraid to even say the word aloud. On a distant broadcast, images leaked, recordings from the day of the resonance, showing energy waves shaped like faces moving through space itself. Some believed it was an illusion. Others said it was proof that the human mind had touched the stars. In hidden corners of the galaxy, religions began to form around it. The children of the storm, they called them, followers who believed humanity carried the collective soul of the universe's forgotten dead. The Council tried to suppress it, declaring the incident classified, but secrets could not contain fear. Commander Reed was summoned once again, though this time he didn't come alone. Behind him walked a small group of humans, scientists, soldiers, and diplomats. They stood together before the Council as if facing judgment, their presence quiet but commanding. The leader of the Council rose shakily. "You have no right," he hissed. "You unleashed something dangerous. Our telepaths are broken, our fleets unstable, our citizens terrified. You will explain yourselves." Reed stepped forward slowly, his voice calm as always. "We didn't unleash anything. You woke it. You demanded to see what was inside us. You forced the door open." "Then close it," shouted one of the delegates. "Shut your minds off, whatever this power is, before it spreads again." Reed looked at him, the faintest trace of sorrow in his eyes. "You can't close something that was never open. You only saw what was always there." The room erupted again, voices shouting over one another, threats and accusations filling the air. But then, suddenly, the lights dimmed. Every device, every comm link, every power core flickered, humming with a strange rhythm, like a heartbeat. The noise silenced the Council instantly. Reed frowned, exchanging glances with his team. "That's not us," he said. "Something's responding." Outside the great windows of the chamber, the stars themselves seemed to pulse, faint waves of light rippling across the black. It wasn't natural. It was synchronized. And it was coming from thousands of light years away, planet after planet lighting up like signals, one after another. The Velka telepaths, those who had survived, began to scream in unison from their temples. "It's them," one shouted. "It's the memory, they're awake again." The Council turned to Reed in panic. "What did you do?" Reed shook his head. "Nothing. You made the galaxy remember." Across space, civilizations began reporting the same phenomenon. Ancient ruins glowing, long-dead technology activating, buried signals transmitting for the first time in millions of years. It was as if something vast and unseen was stirring beneath reality itself. "What's happening?" whispered Syrah, who had come to stand behind Reed. "The resonance," he said softly. "It reached too far. The memories we carry, they've touched more than minds now. They've awakened something older." "Older than what?" she asked. Reed looked out at the endless black, his reflection pale in the glass. "Older than the stars." The Council chamber shook again as a wave of psychic static rippled through space, powerful enough to disrupt communications across entire sectors. Systems went dark, And for the first time in history, the Galactic Union lost contact with its outer colonies. A terrified voice from the council floor cried, "You've doomed us all." Reed turned sharply, his tone cold. "No. You doomed yourselves when you thought knowledge was control." "Then what are we supposed to do?" shouted another delegate. "Pray." Reed's gaze drifted back to the stars. "Remember," he said. "That's what we've always done. When the dark comes, remembering is the only thing that keeps you alive." Silence fell again. The council could feel it now too, that faint vibration beneath reality, like a heartbeat too large for comprehension. Syrah looked at Reed and whispered, "If the dark you remember is real, if it wakes again, can you stop it?" Reed didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened. "We don't stop it," he said finally. "We stand against it, like we always have." Then, quietly, almost to himself, he added, "That's why we survived when others didn't." As he spoke, far beyond the Union's borders, sensors detected something moving in deep space. A shape without form, vast and silent, like a shadow older than light. It wasn't coming toward them yet, but it was watching. The council didn't know it, but Reed did. Humanity had seen this before, in the old memories buried inside every human mind, the ones no telepath could endure. The storm was returning, and this time, it wasn't coming for humanity alone. The galaxy trembled in fear, but somewhere inside that fear, a single truth began to spread. When the darkness returns, the only light that endures is the one that remembers. Days passed in uneasy silence after the resonance, but the galaxy itself no longer felt the same. The stars seemed colder, the space between them heavier, as if the universe was holding its breath. Across hundreds of worlds, the same strange dreams began to spread, visions of endless night, of voices whispering in languages older than time. Telepaths tried to block it, but the darkness slipped through every barrier like smoke through glass. No one understood what it was, but deep down, every being knew it was connected to the humans. Commander Reed stood aboard the human flagship Vigilant Dawn, watching the stars from the bridge. Behind him, his crew moved quietly, disciplined, but even they felt it. The pull in their minds, that old instinct that came before every great storm. Syrah stood beside him, her expression pale, tendrils dimly glowing. "It's spreading faster," she whispered. "Worlds are losing contact one by one. The outer colonies of the Union, they've gone dark." Reed didn't move his eyes from the viewport. "It's not spreading," he said slowly. "It's awakening. The same thing that tried to end us before." "What thing?" Syrah asked. "The dark you remember." He nodded faintly. "When humanity was young, it came to our world. Shadows that devoured light, entities that fed on fear itself. We called them nightmares once, but they were real. We survived them by learning not to fear, by remembering every death they caused until fear turned into strength. That's the memory your telepaths woke. Now the galaxy feels what we felt." Outside, the void rippled. The sensors began to whine, detecting something vast moving beyond visible range. Every monitor filled with static, and the ship's lights dimmed. The crew froze. From the comms, terrified voices came from other ships. "It's in our sector. Something's blocking the stars. It's looking at us." Then silence. Syrah gripped the railing, her mind trembling from the pressure of unseen thought. "It's not just energy," she gasped. "It's consciousness. It's alive." Reed's voice was steady. "We know. We've fought it before." He pressed a control on the console. The ship's AI activated emergency protocols, and deep within the hangars, ancient human warships powered up. Designs older than the Union itself, silent guardians kept for a day humanity prayed would never come again. "Project Remembrance," Reed said softly. "Built from our oldest blueprints. Engines that burn through gravity itself. Weapons that remember the last war." Syrah stared at him, horror and awe mixing in her face. "You built this, because you knew this would happen again." Reed nodded once. "History doesn't repeat, it remembers. We just listen better than most." Across the void, the shadow began to form, massive and formless, stretching across the stars like ink spilling through water. Its presence pressed against every mind in the sector, flooding telepaths with despair. The council broadcasted desperate pleas for unity, but their words faded under the psychic roar that followed. Entire fleets turned to retreat, but human ships held their line, engines burning bright in defiance. Reed stood at the command deck, his voice calm through the storm. You wanted to see our minds, Council. You wanted to know what made us different. This is it. We remember how to fight the dark. The comm opened to every ship in the Union. We stand now where our ancestors once stood. The fear you feel, we've lived with it for 1,000,000 years. Let it burn through you, not break you. Remember what we taught you. Fear is only the shadow of memory. The light is what remains. Syrah turned toward him, her voice shaking. You can't face that alone. Reed looked back at her, eyes sharp and full of quiet fury. We were never alone. And then it happened. The resonance returned, stronger than before. Across every human world, billions of minds connected as one. The telepaths watching felt it like a tidal wave, an ocean of thought and will rising together. The old chant echoed again, louder this time, not as words but as presence. We remember. We endure. We stand. The shadow struck first, swallowing light and sound, but the human fleet answered with fire that burned white, each explosion powered by the combined will of their united consciousness. The void itself seemed to tremble under the clash of will and darkness. Syrah fell to her knees as her mind filled with visions, the same ones that had once broken her. Only this time, they didn't frighten her. She saw humans standing side by side through centuries of storms, their fear turning into resolve, their pain into fire. The storm wasn't rage, it was love forged in suffering. The dark screamed through the void, but the sound met something stronger, memory, boundless and eternal. You can't kill what refuses to forget, Reed whispered. The wave of light tore through the darkness, not destroying it, but sealing it back into the void from which it came. Silence followed, endless and heavy. The stars slowly returned. The galaxy exhaled. On the Council's world, surviving telepaths wept as the voices faded. The Union was safe, but changed forever. Syrah looked at Reed, her eyes wet with awe. You didn't defeat it, she said softly. You reminded it who you were. Reed nodded, exhaustion on his face but a faint smile on his lips. That's all we ever do. We remind the dark that we're still here. He turned to the viewport, where the stars shone bright once more. The galaxy will learn what we already know, he said quietly. Light isn't the opposite of darkness, it's what survives after it. The ship drifted forward through the peaceful void. Far behind them, the sealed shadow pulsed once, then went still, as if waiting for the next age. And as humanity's fleet vanished into the stars, their chant echoed faintly through the cosmos one last time. Soft, eternal, unstoppable. We remember. We endure. We stand.